Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pregnant Hag Podcast. I have another very exciting guest for you today, and his name is Michael J. King, and he's a luthier. Do I pronounce that correctly, Michael?
Luthier. That's probably the anglicized version of it.
Okay, because I was saying luthier, and then thought, well, I'm not a native speaker of English. I looked it up, and it came out as luthier. So
I think so. Yeah, I think most of the time I'd say instrument maker because otherwise I get a blank stare from people. And also I haven't technically made. I haven't made my lute yet. So, which is where the word originated from. So
that's interesting.
So technically, I'm a maker of instruments, which is what a luthier is. But I still haven't finished my lute yet. So.
People call this instrument maker. What I usually do is I read out a bio. So in your case, I've been on your website and I've collected what you said about your own background. You want me to just read that out, or would you like to just tell the audience what your bio or background?
If you can read it out, I've forgotten myself actually. I wrote it out.
I can improvise a little because this is
it's not really no.
But you have an art and design diploma from Waltham Forest College in London, and that was in 1994. And then in 1997, you have an honors degree in fine art sculpture from what is now the University of Gloucestershire. And then 2000 to 2002, you have a city and guilds level 1 and 2 in fine furniture and cabinet making. And from 2002 to the present, you're a self-employed luthier. Is that right? Anything you want to add?
Well, it was more of an organic sort of process. So I started doing art, thinking I was going to be an artist. And then, ever since I was 13 or 14, I've wanted to make instruments, and I have dabbled in making instruments. But it wasn't really to university that I had time to use the woodworking room and to really get to know how to make things properly.
God, that's so exciting. So, what was the first instrument you ever made, say, at a very young age?
13 or 14, I started making an electric guitar. So that was my first at school. Wow. So for my GCSEs or whatever the equivalent was then, it was I did that for design and technology. So that was my, and I designed electric ukulele and I designed electric guitar, but I only finished the electric guitar at the time. And that was because I was in a band at the time playing, so it was for myself to play really.
That's wonderful. I think that's a wonderful way to get started. So you haven't made your lute, but you've made electric guitars and many other instruments. And in a recent email, you told me that most of your current work is making lyres for Anglo Saxon and Viking re-enactors. And you said that actually the Sutton Hoo Visitor Center has one of your lyres on display, which is pretty cool. So I thought I could put the link for that in the show notes.
Oh, lovely.
Can you also tell us a bit, because you say that the Viking lyres that people commission from you, that's influenced by their use in the Vikings TV series, and Einar Selviks playing a Kravik, if that's pronunciation lyre. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, so I've been making reenactment Anglo Saxon lyres since about 2000. Well, I started making in 1989, but I obviously, as a self-employed person in 2002, I started making lyres about 2003, 2004. And it was for reenactors. It's for people who are walking around, dressed as an Anglo-Saxon, and so mostly they're all for those sort of reenactors people. But then, I guess 7 or 8 years ago, there was an increase of people wanting lyres at the time, and it was through the Viking show that the band Wadruna that Einar Selviks was playing a Kravik Lyre, although that Kravik Lyre isn't from that time period. It's what people identified as a Viking lyre, or as a lyre from the TV series Vikings. And it's also the soundtrack of that lyre is what people really liked, and so so there was an increasing in interesting lyres at that time, and so so I have had years when I've made 10 or 15 lyres, and And it got to the stage where I wasn't able to keep that up at one point, and so. But then because the other side of my work is helping other people make lyres as well, so I've been helping other people to build their own all the way through. So it's So the Kravik Lyre is a sort of a 14th century design, but the actual Kravik Lyre is an actual relic from probably the 16th century. They've carbon dated it to 1600s.
Wow.
So it's like a lyre built in that tradition at the end of its sort of time period. So it's a lovely relic. It's a lovely thing to have something that's part of a living tradition, I think, of lyre making in the north after it died out everywhere else. So in that sense, it is it's part of the Scandinavian heritage, and
just
it's
from
fascinating.
a bit of a later time, the Vikings weren't out raiding anymore, like in the 14th century.
No, we're into beyond 12th century, we're into Christendom, aren't we? So it's from that context. But then the lyre, because of the in the Bible with David and the lyre, that there's an association of lyre and religion anyway. So the lyre was kind of kept going even in the Anglo Saxon period, when it was no longer a pagan instrument. It was played in the church as a teaching instrument. And that's why we see it in manuscripts of King David holding his lyre. It's an Anglo-Saxon lyre they're holding, which is the lyre that was commonplace. And that's the lyre. And until tastes changed and 6 strings was no longer enough, that's and the harp took over, I think, and other instruments, and the fiddle. So then the lyre did sort of die out in most places, but in the north, in certain, it adapted. It became the bowed lyre in some places. In other places, as in the Kravik Lyre, it's still held on as a plucked instrument.
Right. And like, how when you make these instruments, like, what is the starting point? Do you visit museums or look at paintings, or do we have plans left, or what do you work with?
Well, I originally, when I was doing Anglo-Saxon lyres, that was my starting point. I had archaeological reports, so I had reports of what remains they had. So there's you can buy reports of a burial ground, for example, and you find all the contents in it, and they find a part of a lyre, or they find a decorative mount that was on it, and then an idea of, by the size of the grave, how big the lyre might have been.
Okay.
So there's various reports for Anglo-Saxon lyres anyway around the country. The most famous being the Sutton Hoo, which was that's quite a significant amount of the lyre. The top of the lyre, the head, the decoration in bronze, gold-plated bronze at the top. So there's a whole quite a large piece of that was saved. But in other places in Europe, like in Germany, there's a whole lyre has been found in the ground intact. So we know what the whole instrument looked like, and the variabilities. It was different stylistically, different places, but the same construction, the same way of playing, the same way of presenting the strings was there. So we can, by taking all these different pieces, we can get a picture.
So you can put it together. And then do you try to stay very close to what they would have looked like historically, or do you also like put your own sort of kind of twist or interpretation on that?
I started off trying to keep as far as I could to the archaeological, but then you are having to make up certain aspects of it. What I do is I offer what I call replica lyres. So if somebody wants a museum lyre, it's basically as minimal stripped down as possible, so as closest to the finds, not much personal interpretation. But then I do lyres where I experiment with decoration, or I experiment with finishes, or I for my student lyres I use plastic fittings so the strings last for a long time, so it doesn't have the first lyres I made, they had guts and they had hide. And after 3 or 4 months of playing and going outside, the strings would fray and break often. And that's a normal thing. I mean, gut strings don't last more than a few months when you're outdoors. They absorb moisture, they break and fray. But you have to remember, a society where you just go to it's from a pig or a sheep, and you just get some guts, and you either make them yourself or have someone else make them from intestines. So it's and people have experimented with like pig skin, like sausage skins, for example, that you can twist together to make a very basic string. And so it's not hard to make a simple string for a lyre, because you're not fretting like on a guitar. There's less tolerances are needed, so you can. It's not too complicated. it's not like a violin that has to be exact, the same size over every part of the string.
Right.
But you can have a bit more variability in the construction of the string. So, but yeah, so I started to offer gut strings for people in the recording studio or for reenactment, but also I started to experiment with plastic nylon guitar strings and other strings that would work outdoors better. So, I mean, most of my strings that I sell now are like fluorocarbon, which doesn't absorb any moisture from the air. So the instrument will keep its tuning outdoors. So that's where I traditions, if somebody wants an instrument that's correct, the same sort of woods and varnishes, and I will make a replica. Or if somebody wants an instrument that will play in tune most of the time, and they can take outdoors and not worry about it, then I build that kind of lyre. So it's the difference in sound isn't a huge amount, and because of the kinds of strings we get these days, we can like there's the string called it's a killer. It's like a Nile gut. It's a fake gut string. And that sounds pretty close to a gut string. So you can, so there are, things you can use. But yeah, so the ones in behind glass are pure natural guts and as close as I can get to the original. But ones people play, sometimes I'm allowed to be a bit more free with I've got a lyre here. I don't know if you can see, but this is like a standard Viking age lyre, about 9th or 10th century. Plain. There's no decorations on this one though, but it's got the same pegs. But what I've done is I fitted it's got a synthetic guts tailpiece, so this won't break. This will stay in tune. But yeah, again, synthetic strings.
Beautiful.
So that's a small Viking type lyre with pegs with split ends. But that's just plain. There's no decoration, no ornaments. So that's just, somebody could decorate that, or they could, it's basically an empty canvas if you wanted to, put some decoration on it or something. So that's kind of the starting point.
Right.
And I do occasionally decorate them, but I don't. It's not something I do very often. So it takes a lot of. I did film a video of how to decorate a lyre using a technique called coal-rosing for YouTube, and that shows the process of using the knife cuts and putting carbon in and oil and wax. But so there is a tradition of doing that, but there's only one lyre that we've found so far with those decorations on.
Oh, okay. So it may not have been common, or we don't know.
Well, yes, I think that's if you find one lyre with something, it's hard to extrapolate that for every lyre. So, but at the same time, there are principles on that one lyre you can apply to other lyres because you've got a piece of the fragment and you can put it all together.
And I guess like people also want to personalize their instruments. Like people sometimes might want like runes on them or other designs.
People sometimes ask me to write runes inside, so I do that sometimes. Or
inside where you don't see it.
Yeah. So they know it's there.
Oh wow, I love that.
Yeah, so secret runes. Yeah. So
secret runes. Wow.
Yeah. So I do like that. I mean, I did a recent Kravik Lyre for someone, and I put the runes on the edge for him, because I put them on the edge facing the audience, so that the audience would read the inscription on the side. But that's rare. I rarely do that. That's I feel a bit more exposed doing that, I guess. So, because and I know I'm bringing together different cultures as well. Different. I mean, my recent Kravik Lyres have had Icelandic rune patterns combined with Anglo Saxon runes on it. So it's sort of it is a sort of bringing together many traditions into one thing. And I'm aware that it's not a historical 9th or 10th century thing I'm doing, but then it's part of a new tradition, so which is quite a nice thing as well, I think.
Yeah, and also there's always that thing about like following tradition and also like making our own creations. And you quoted in an email a beautiful observation by Einar Selviks, who had said, "The old songs are gone. We need to make new ones." And like maybe that goes for instruments as well. Like I often say to my own students, like when I teach Old Norse traditions and Seder, I put a lot of focus on historical accuracy because there's quite a lot of nonsense floating around the internet, information that's just not correct. And then people find that and keep on sort of regurgitating that. Yes. So I think it's very important to tell people like what is correct and what is not.
Oh, yes.
But after that, I also think it's important that people like make it their own and bring their own creativity to it. So I think there is always that, what's the word? It's like a spectrum almost. It's like
is sort of there is a word, but it's like a tug between the two, and and there is a I mean, a lot of the things I do, I mean, I work with sort of so this early recreation stuff, and also I do some folk instrument stuff as well, which is modern, and between the two there is a strange sort of gulf, and there is a lot of snobbery with like early music, and where things have to, and where things have to be exactly right for each period, and music has to be played on this instrument alone. You can't play Bach on the piano, or all those kinds of rules and stuff that come out, and it's like, you know, if you were living in that times, they would use whatever was available, and they would use, you know, whatever means, you know, people adapt everything around them always. So so I think it's part of an ongoing tradition to do that, to re-synthesize things, and to
and well, I think it's great that sort of reconstruction work is done, and that we preserve and like show like what it would have been like, but also from my point of view there's space for both, for the innovation and for the tradition.
And I do,
don't you then like hit tuning issues as well? Because I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding, like playing violin and the cello, is that many instruments were like tuned differently. So the kind of tuning that we use today is like modern, and our ears are sort of habituated to that. But actually a few centuries ago, as we move through the centuries, like people like would have tuned their instruments in a different way, and that it would have like, if we had heard that in real time now, some of it may sound quite off to our ears, because our ears are habituated to modern tuning. Is that true or not?
That's absolutely true. No, the further you go back, the more scales were in the natural sort of frequencies. So if you think about an overtone flute, that's that sort of sound which sounds very discordant and doesn't fit in with modern instruments. That's part of the natural scale, and so we. I mean, for example, with the lyre, we have writings around the 10th century that say how a lyre was tuned. We don't know what frequency that really was. We don't know what pitch that really was in reality. And actually, we don't really know what that would have sounded like in real life. You know, in that sense, we are interpreting, and you know, and beyond that, when we're talking about stuff that isn't written down, you know, we are having to, you know, experiment and you know. We definitely don't know, and it's, you know, tunings have only been standardized for what, 100 years or a few hundred years, really. So I mean, tunings used in the classical world, tunings were local. So in different parts of Germany, that this tuning would be this tuning, A equals this tuning somewhere else. You've got is it the Vivaldi tuning at A equals 432, another one, you know, so all these different tunings and pitches, and only, I guess, as people have come together, that we needed standards, and so standards were chosen. But before that, it was
play together. You need to agree on.
Before that, it's what fitted your voice, and I really believe with the lyre and with the canteler, these instruments were made to fit the human voice. Whoever was singing, whoever's playing. I mean, lyres come in various sizes, and you can imagine, you know, and you can adjust them to fit a singer's voice quite easily. And that's where I see, you know, so you know, when people ask me about tuning, I first ask them what's your best singing key? You know, what's your best pitch for singing? Because most people who aren't professional singers have a pitch. If you play a piano and find notes, you'll find notes that you can sing along with better than others. And then you discover what your dominant key is, and then from there you can create an instrument that's in your pitch, so you can sing along with it if you want to sing along. Obviously, if you're just playing instrumental, that's a different.
But that like makes so much sense, and also that would have made a very good starting point. That would have been an obvious thing for people to do. I think this is all like fascinating. And you just mentioned the canteler there, and of course I want to talk about cantelers. Because recently, a very dear friend of mine commissioned you to make a canteler for me, and it has like the shape of a bird, and I called it lintu, which is Finnish for bird. And I've actually left it in Sweden, or else I would be holding it up. But it's in Sweden right now. I'm just in London briefly, then I'm going back to Sweden.
Oh, right, okay.
So Lintu has traveled to Sweden.
Lovely, that's nice.
I would really love to hear, you know, can you tell my audience, I know, but can you tell the audience what a canteler is, and also how did you get into making cantelers? How did that happen?
Okay, well, it's so a canteler or a canteler is originally a 5-string lyre or zither type instrument from northern Scandinavia, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. So it's all of them. It's all that sort of region, and it's ancient, and there's stories from different places that talk about the historical instrument, but it's we're talking thousands of years probably, and an origin, an instrument that's sort of spread over the whole of Northern Europe, I think, at some point. There are similar instruments like zithers in like Byzantium later on, but they may have been influenced. We don't know. There's an exchange of ideas about different instruments. But anyway, this cantala is a 5-string. It's an instrument very much like a lyre, and it had the same function as a lyre. Right. So it was played by bards or by singers who would recite, their regional stories on it, and hold the folklore of their culture, I think. So they almost died out, and then they were brought back again. So it's had a resurgence. So I think there was down to like one player, and then it's had a resurgence. So it's unlike, and what inspired me 30 years ago when I was looking into it was that with the Anglo Saxon lyre, we have an end of a tradition that just ended. Another traditions replaced it. Whereas with the cantala, we had a continuation. From and we can look back in Russia where they found guslies, which is the Russian equivalent in the 10th century, very similar design. And so you have an instrument that has a long tradition and that has sustained. And so I used that when I was first starting off, trying to find out how to play an Anglo-Saxon lyre. I looked at the cantala, how that was played with the block and strum, and I learned how to do chords on it. And I also learned the difference between how people play in kindergarten, which is very simply, to professional players who play very complicated double-handed playing. So you have a wide spectrum of ability. But yeah, so for me, I was really interested in this sort of tradition. When I read about it in the 1980s, and I think I ordered a book from Finland of plans from a maker in the early 90s, I think, or in mid 90s maybe. So I think I did it through fax as well. It was really old, before the internet kind of was able. So I remember ordering it through fax or something so I got a book and plans in Finnish.
In Finnish, okay.
Oh yes, it was a book in Finnish, and so it's about 1999. I made my first one, little small cantala that that was the first one I made. And then when I started self-employment, I was originally going to be a furniture maker, but in between making furniture, I started to make cantalas and sell them on eBay. Okay. And so this is 2002. I was selling cantalas. And it was really at first just to make enough money to pay for the materials, really. So I was selling them at cost prices and making a loss actually at first. So, but that's how I started. I started selling these cantalas on eBay, and then all of a sudden I got orders from around the world, and people started commissioning, and so the instrument making really took off. And I met I met a composer, a performer called Lani K. Thompson in America. And she came over to visit me, and then she wrote an article about it. And then I had a TV crew coming to visit me. So this is 2003. So I was making about 20 or 30 of these instruments a year at one point. But I wasn't selling them for very much money at the time. So, but it got me started, and I stopped making furniture. And I decided this is what I really want to do. And so that's what the cantala showed me. That's what I really, really wanted to do. So I did it. So I just carried on making musical instruments from that point onwards.
Right. And why does my cantala look like a bird? Is that a traditional design? I mean, I absolutely love it, but why does it have a bird's head?
That is the traditional, it's part of a traditional Finnish design. I think there's some other, I think I've made it look more like a bird's head. Each one is different. Every one I make is, even though I use the same, like a pattern I use to rock the wood, when I come to do it, I do it freehand. So everyone is very slightly different to each other. So if you see them, they'll look similar, but they'll be all different. Sometimes they have different size holes, different eye shapes, or slightly different curve. But each one is unique to itself. It's a character of its own. Just what I enjoy.
The beauty of it,
Yeah, I don't want to make. I have no interest in making carbon copies of of my own
No.
instruments.
But then it becomes a production line. And also you have so many options, like different woods, you're doing it at a different time, you're making it for a different person. There's so many variables in the process.
Oh, I love the variable. I really love that part of it. If I had to make copies of exact instruments, you know, I would do it, and I do it occasionally, but it's not, you know, it's not, I wouldn't keep doing it all as much as I do, I think. I love the different woods, the love, just making it slightly different each time, or improving something, a little feature each time. You know, just trying to experiment. Each one is slightly different and unique, I think, in that way. Yeah,
because also I know that in the Kalevala, you know, the great epic of Finland, we have the hero Wainamoinen, and he makes the first, this is the mythical explanation.
Yes.
He makes the first kantele from a pike. Yes, you know. I'm also quite intrigued by that idea that you could use animal skulls and make string instruments.
Well, you have to remember, a pike is the pike historically, going back 3,000 or 4,000 years, was a huge, you know, shark-like creature. It wasn't
big.
You know, you're talking a huge 12-foot or longer fish, and so these instruments were made of bones, and you could stretch skin across them to make a sound. You know, I think there's all kinds of ways you could make an instrument with bones and skin and hair, and I mean, there are parallel instruments in Wales. There's a harp that was traditionally made of horse skin and horse hair. So the Welsh, so the traditional Welsh ancient harp was made of horsehair strings, and again you have that in lyres that also had strings, bowed lyres in the north, and you know, until recently. So there is a tradition of using horsehair as a string. I mean, it is a very sort of, you can listen to the horse string kantele, and it has a very rhythmic sound, a sort of very sort of, but you can see how that's used in a sort of, you know, with the drum and other things. It becomes a very rhythmic instrument, I think, when you're having horsehair strings strummed or plucked. It's a very different thing to the modern sort of jangly sound that we associate with the modern, relatively modern. I mean, I think kanteles have had metal strings probably for 1,000 years. I think there's instruments, as I said, mentioned in Russia, where they found kantele-like instruments with iron and steel strings. Okay. So we go back 1,000 years. We're talking about 1,000 years of metal strings, probably. But in between, I think, you know, people have used what they can get hold of, I think. And so whether it's intestines or horsehair or brass or whatever, or iron strings, they have just used to make music. To make whatever, they've used what's around them and available to make music. Yeah, and
of course that makes complete sense. And another thing you said in an email that I thought was so poetic and beautiful, you said that, you know, with playing, the sound's going to improve further, and the depth of the tone as the wood learns to be a musical instrument. Yeah. And that's been very much on my mind, playing it in Sweden, by the sea and in the forest, this sort of awareness that my instrument was wood before, and before that it was a tree or trees, because it's different kinds of wood. And this awareness that it's still learning to be an instrument, as I play it. I think that's so poetic.
No, it's beautiful. I think certainly in museums where they have violins, for example, in cases, they take them out every so often to play them, because they go to sleep and they forget how to be an instrument. They forget how to resonate.
Yeah.
And this is a scientific. This is not just this. I mean, it sounds, but it's just science. The wood and the fibers and the way that the cells are aligned. Sound changes things, and sound has sympathetic resonance. So so as you play the instrument, the cells change and the wood adapts. The wood dries and the instrument moves a little bit. And so there's all these changes, and then those changes result in a better sound, usually with these kinds of instruments. The sound just gets better. So I think your instrument has a cedar top, and that only takes 3 or 4 months, I think, to really play it, to start sounding well. Whereas an instrument with a thick sort of maple top can take several years before it starts to sound its best. Yeah. But yeah, it's the playing. I mean, some musical instrument makers have a case of where they put their instruments in and play through speakers music to the instruments, so that when the customer gets it, it has already started the journey. But I don't do that. But that, that's the same sort of, I like the idea of people playing it in. It's you're contributing to that instrument's life, and the way it gives back to you as well. It's a sort of a circular process. Yeah, an exchange. Yes,
it is an exchange.
Yeah, and I do feel that with an instrument, that it's, when you spend time with it, there's a communication. Yes.
And also, I really felt with Linte, with my Cantella, that, and I think of her as a she for some reason, but that it's different taking her to the sea or in the forest, because these places have like different energies and moods, and I kind of feel that she responds to the surroundings. So sort of, like playing her, and maybe it's also just the natural acoustic properties of those places.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
don't know. But there's also a sense of that, and she's tuning into what is around, and that she produces a slightly different sound depending on, like, are you sitting on a rock in the sea, or are you sitting in the middle of the forest? These are things I've done recently.
Absolutely. The environment changes it changes everything. It changes the instrument's response as well. It's some environments suck sound out, some reflected it back, and also the humidity in different places will change the wood. It will change the way the wood behaves as well. So it's not just, it's the environment affects the instrument completely.
Yeah, so it's not only in my imagination, it's actually on other levels.
No, it's a measure. I think it's a measurable thing. It's something you can actually, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing, and it's it taps into your intuition as well, and the way you respond to the instrument. So it's I do like that, and with instruments like the Cantella with less strings, you're in some ways you notice it more, I think, because you're focusing very much on a very limited parameters.
That's true. Yeah.
And so when you only have 5 things to choose from, or 5 notes in this case, you become far more aware, and it's a more rapid connection, I think, in that sense.
Yeah, and also you become more aware, more creative in what you can do with those 5 strings, because you don't have the frets like a guitar has, or like a violin or a cello. You put your fingers down, there are no frets, but you put your fingers down to shorten the string, so you can make all the sort of tones. But on a Cantella, like, you have a more limited range. But then also on also enchanted by YouTube videos where you're like demonstrating how you pull all these different sounds out. Like, you have like 5 Cantella videos, watch them all like many times. And then you're like, demonstrating, like, you could use a little bow, or, you're like, where you put your finger, it's like where you put your fingers on the strings, you'll pull a different sound from it. And, to me, it was like pure magic. I felt you're like a magician at work, pulling the music from the strings. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and this is just the very basics. I feel I did spend a few years playing the Cantella back then. That was about 15 years ago, and then I've mostly focused on lyre. But I made an instrument for a musician called Patrick Wolf, and he took the instrument up on a hill, and he basically started to compose an album on it, and so it became part of his album, I think. And it's called Wind in the Wires, the album. And so that's available. It was about 15 years ago, but so he took an instrument to Cornwall, I think, and went up on a hill, and he was just letting the wind play, and he sort of, he was very intuitively wrote a song while he was on top of a hilltop with his instrument.
I love that. Because, like, there was another thought I had playing by the sea, that at some point the afternoon breeze came, and then you have like, the wind's rippling across the strings, and you get a faint sort of response from the strings, and it's like, I could even just put the Cantella here and let it sing by itself. I don't even need to play it for it to make music. It's fantastic.
Well, I think it knows all the tunes, so I think you're relying on the instruments sometimes. It's like a piano that has all the on a piano you have 88 notes, and it knows all the notes of every music that's ever been composed on those 88 notes. With the Cantella, it's the same sort of thing. But if you let the wind blow, I went weeks ago, and one of the players there was he took his lyre out. It was a windy day, and he was just holding the lyre in the wind and letting and he recorded it and put it on YouTube. The music of the wind on the lyre.
Oh wow!
So I can put a link to that. But it's so it's a thing. So Aeolian harp is the name of an instrument that's the traditional a wind harp. So,
a wind,
I mean, some sculptors have made sculptors have made giant wind harps and put them on hills and attached them to trees, and to make giant wind harp sounds.
Wow, yeah. No, I love that. And also the whole, like, the instruments being in communication with the landscape. And then in my line of work, you'd think of maybe the spirits of the land coming and playing the harp. Again, you get that exchange, you get that interaction.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. So, you already gave this a brief mention, but I want to ask a question about it. Why is it you spend so much of your time helping other people make the instruments to you that you build? Like, you're not like putting yourself out of business. Like, what's going on there?
Yes, it's something I've always felt really strongly. I think something happened when I was about 30 years ago. 40 years ago, 30 years ago, I was interested in bagpipes. And there was a bagpipe maker I really liked, and I was asking him how to make a bagpipe. I was just interested, and we had a few exchanges, but he didn't want to tell me. He said because it was his secret. He had secret sizes of the pipes, and he didn't want to share. And I thought that's okay. That's understand. That's sad. But then this guy died within a few weeks after I spoke to him. After I was asking the sizes, and it kind of brought home to me that we're on this planet for a very short space of time, and and that's I want to do something. If I do any work, I like the idea that if I left this earth tomorrow, the stuff I've done will carry on, and people will carry on working, building on the work I've created. So I like the heritage, the sort of and the transference sort of. I don't know. I was thinking today, my stepmother, she's an educator. She was an educator. She was a French teacher, but I think in some ways I've had instilled in me this sort of desire to share and to teach. I think so. Even though I've not been a teacher directly, I have taught people how to make lyres, how to make instruments. And putting myself out of business. The way I really see it, I guess, is that if somebody wants to make what I do and carry on doing it, then I want to encourage them, and then I'll make something else. So there's a lot of instruments that I haven't made yet, and I haven't got time. I've only got a short span to make them in. So
exactly. Actually, one of the questions I had here, like, do you have an unlived instrument dream? Like maybe that's what you're getting now. Like, what have you not made that you would love to make?
There's things in the cupboard that I've got plans that I've bought, and I was going to make myself a clavicle for my 40th birthday, and other things happened in my life at that time, so it never got made. So the wood is still in the cupboard. I've still got the plans. I did all the research. I was going to make a harpsichord at one point. That's the plans are there. When I was 16, I was going to build a boat, and I still got the plans for the boat. So there are lots of things that I had. The problem is that I get distracted by other things to make. So there's always something new and interesting. And I've got so many instruments that I make anyway that I don't have much time to make new stuff.
And that's the thing as well, isn't it? It's like, in a way, it's like you continue doing what you do well, because that's how you serve the community, but also finding the time for innovation and for your own creativity. At least that's in my work, that's a tension that I experience. If I feel like you, it's very important to like pass it on so it doesn't die with me. But also there needs to be like space for my own like creative stuff as well. If I'm to be a happy human being. So there's a tension there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I enjoy emailing with people around the world, and I sell plans. It's not just that it is part of my business. So I do make some income from downloads and from plans I sell, and I am trying to write up all my notes into little books that I'll publish eventually. So that there will be something left behind for people to work on. I mean, I see. I like the idea that people are going to take my plans and make something different with it, and build and there'll be a new discovery, and then they will change. They'll change what the interpretation then, and so it's trying to build on. It seems quite sad if I do all this work and keep it secret and don't share it with everyone.
But I think that's the big lesson you learned from the instrument maker you mentioned. I remember, and this is already maybe not 10 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, I was talking to a colleague where I had this philosophy of like teach my students as much as I can of what I know myself. And she said, but I don't think I want to do that. Speaking for herself, like I think I want to keep some things like for myself, and I want to like share it all with students. But it's like I kind of like hear that, but also you are like more elderly than I am. So like, what if you die? then your knowledge, it like dies with you, exactly like you were saying.
Yeah.
And I kind of think, that cannot be the way to go. I think it is important to find ways of sharing it. It's something I really believe in myself. Like,
Yeah,
you don't want it dying with you, do you?
No. And I think in the musical instrument community, there has been a time when people have kept secrets for commercial reasons. And I kind of decided from the very beginning that I would try to do almost like an anti-copyright kind of things, that I would, so that it is a balance between obviously making myself completely impoverished but no, I'm trying to think. There's some instruments that I make that I've purposely made sure other people know that they can make their own and sell them if they want. And there's lots of instrument makers I know now who have started off on my plans and drawings and who I helped start, who are doing very well now, doing very well. So I'm very pleased. They're like my students. So I'm very pleased that they've done very well. And there's things I started, like the Lyre forums. I try to start forums up to start talking about these instruments and things, and those are took off as well. So I hope I've helped the community and given it back as well.
It sounds like you have, but how does so you have like forums and you have plans available, so people can go on your website or put your website in the show notes so people can go and download plans. But do you get these sort of emergency emails like, oh, I got stuck, oh help, this is going wrong, what do I do now? Or like, like how much of your time does that take up, responding to the calls for help?
I don't take my phone to bed anymore. My phone stays downstairs now. But there was a time when I would wake up in the middle of the night and I get someone from America or someone who needs help. And I'm at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm explaining how to do something in woodwork or whatever.
No.
And so there was. So now I between 9 and I don't have many boundaries. I should have more boundaries. I actually had to. It's with Facebook that I've had to be most disciplined now. Now I only go onto Facebook for like half an hour a day. Because I will just get sucked into a rabbit hole.
I know, it's full of rabbit holes, isn't it?
Yes. And so it's a time sink, and I'm behind schedule at the moment. I can't afford the time off to do that kind of stuff.
But isn't Facebook also, I think it's got a dual aspect, at least in my life. Yes, it can be a time sink, and I need to monitor like how I deal with that. But I also sort of find Facebook is one of the main vehicles that gets my work out in the world, like how I sell paintings, so people find my courses or whatever it may be.
Absolutely, no, it's.
Where would I be without Facebook? I also have to acknowledge I owe it a debt of gratitude for what it does.
Absolutely, no, and I feel I'm kind of an addict who's trying to manage the situation now. So I've had times when I've spent all my time on the computer, emailing, texting, watching YouTube videos, responding to things. I've had times where I got sucked into that all the time. And at the moment on my forums on Facebook, I've got friends who are administrators now who help out. Who do the adding and stuff, so they, to be fair, I rely on them completely almost now, because I only go in for like half an hour in the evening, very restrictive. But most of the time, if someone emails me, I normally get back to them quite quickly. I try and, most questions are not new questions, but I'm happy to answer. Most questions doesn't answer, and most problems people have are problems that other humans have had in the past. So it's most things can be sorted out, or there's a solution, or I quite pride myself in finding a solution if there's stuff.
But doesn't it then, you already mentioned books earlier, the books you're going to write in the future, but doesn't it make sense to like make a book and have like a frequently asked questions section, or the?
I think so. I have, and I'm trying to compile some of those things into a. With the downloads I sell, there are notes about making the instrument, and so I'm trying to write up those with the questions and into something. And again, it's part of heritage, leaving something behind, and also it's a nice, I can point people towards a book then, rather than have to.
Well, it sort of saves time. My first book essentially consisted of all the questions I've been asked. Like my book was about like doing shamanic work with children. And like every day the emails would come in, like on all platforms and email, and I was like giving the same answer out so many times that in the end I thought, if I just like put this all in a book, And then when people email me, I say chapter 2, page 61
Absolutely.
or whatever, just direct them there. It does save time, really does.
No, I think that's, and also, I don't know about you, but I find now I have to look up my own work. If someone asks me a question, I have to then go and watch a YouTube video that I've recorded.
That you have made.
Because I can't remember how to do that anymore either. I've forgotten it. But luckily, me in the past remembers it.
Yeah.
Or I've already written down the response 10 years ago, but I've forgotten that response.
Oh, well,
and so I look through the emails. I suddenly discover this person who seems to know everything, and he knows the answers to the questions, and I've forgotten those answers. So it's
exactly. So you need to like keep an archive where it's all organized by subject, and you can just like flip through it and see what do I have on this topic.
Yeah, I think so. But often I'm making an instrument. I haven't made it for 2 years. I go on YouTube to find how do I do it. I don't remember how. I don't remember how what goes together, and I have to learn it from the beginning again. I've written it down. I've drawn the pictures. But I've got so many instruments that sometimes it's my brain has to find that space again and remember. Yes, I remember now.
And also, like, can't you like video yourself during key parts when you're doing a key maneuver, like video it and then stick that all in a file so you can watch yourself doing it in the future?
I have done things. I had a customer coming to me with a lyre, a Greek lyre that she needed stringing up, and I hadn't done it for 6 years, and my brain just couldn't remember how the lyre string went over. And she sat there for about 3 hours, I think, while I remembered
trying to work it out.
Yes, and eventually got there, and as soon as she left afterwards, I quickly recorded it because I knew that if I didn't record it, my brain was just going to be gone again. Yeah. So now I've got it on video to refer back to when I next time I forget and don't know how to do it. But it's because it's a particular knot in a way that, and it's a traditional way of tuning a string without a peg, and it's very complicated if you haven't done it for a while. So it's I haven't got one here, but it's on a Greek lyre. Traditionally, you don't have the string goes over a bar, so a string goes over a bar, and you have like a leather strap that you tighten up, but you've got to tie the string in a certain way to create tension, and it's getting the right order, putting the string on the correct order and the tension, and I think there's a wooden stick you put in as well to help turn it, but it's completely different to a normal lyre peg. So again, I've done it in the past and I've learned how to do it, and I've forgotten, and it took but now I can look it up. I've got it on video. I can look it up if I forget. So it's very handy putting the YouTube videos out just as a way of remembering.
Well, exactly, like your own YouTube library for yourself.
Yeah. Yes, for me, it's for me as much as them, but.
And I mean, you have a great YouTube channels. As I said, I'll put it in the show notes, and I'm going to direct people there. So, I don't want to take too much of your time because I can hear how busy you are. Is there a question you had hoped I would ask that I have not asked? Anything you're going to share that I haven't touched upon?
I can't think of anything off the hand. This is the first time I've done a sort of interview type thing. So it's I record video all the time, but I've never done this sort of thing. So this is a new thing. So it's strange because most of the time I'm recording myself and then I edit myself, and then so it's
I see. So you've lost control.
And if I'm doing it and my wife comes in or someone else is around, I find it incredibly hard to keep on speaking and so it's but thank you for letting me do this today, because it's something that I wanted to do, and I'm quite anxious most times, and I mostly keep out of the spotlight and out of the limelight. I'm quite happy for people to go on stage and to be the face and to do things, but I'm quite happy behind the scenes, helping people and doing that sort of support work. But it's nice also to get out there and talk to people. I think
both are important. I've heard that actually on other YouTube channels where people have described themselves as very introverted and they don't even like talking to other human beings. Or they're surrounded by animals on a farm, but they have an amazing YouTube channel with all of the stories. And then people say, "But hang on, like you're right, you're on YouTube." But I said, when you're like talking to myself and talking to a camera, it's like easier than talking to other people. And that was a new idea for me as a teacher, thinking, I hadn't thought of that. But maybe it is like that.
yeah, it's just, I mean, it's become a more common thing in this world to be isolated and talk to yourself and talk to people on a video call and stuff. But again, it's something I've done it once this year, I think. And that's it's rare, even with my children, and I kind of like the audio call mostly because I can focus better. I can sort of focus in on what they're. Whereas if I'm looking at them at the time, I find it harder to focus. But there's other times when I like to see their face. So it's a balance, I guess, between those two.
It is a balance, like different things, but also in the modern times of free YouTube video just works better. And also, like, you could hold up a lyre, and people, if you just hear people talk, like, you don't always have a picture of what they look like or who they are.
Absolutely,
So
no.
I am quite fond of the video format. I have to say.
No, I think it's great. It's I think it's a good thing.
So, do you have a question for me also? Like, we're gonna wrap it up now and let you go. Like,
this is going to be terrible. My brain is just blank at this point in time.
Okay, well, it's not essential, but just I've been grilling you. I'll give you the opportunity.
I feel, yes, I was going to spend some time this week, and I just ran out of time this week. I ran out. I was drawing actually. This has been a drawing week because I needed. Every so often I need to take a few days off from the workshop and the dust and everything. And so this week I was trying to finish some drawings off and some research that I was doing. And so, so I just haven't had a chance to this week. I'm back to Cantaloupe and lyre making next week. So
great. But thank you so much for taking the time out and for finding the time to do this. Sure. Yes, and to my audience, I will say that I'll try to still make some videos over the summer, but I'm also going to take some time off work, so there might not be a monthly installment, but let's see what happens. So, thank you very much, and see you all next time, and stay tuned.